Yeah. So interview, as I said, there will be multiple rounds of interview. Okay. So the first round of interview, interviewers are mostly theoretical questions. There will be questions like how explain how a decision tree works, explain how a random forest works, explain bias variance, explain gradient descent, and they'll be asking some standard techniques of how you can increase the accuracy and all these things. There are some standard techniques in machine learning which are done. So mostly the first round of interview questions will be around machine learning and statistics. Okay. So deep learning will be there, but very fundamentals. Less, not will not go deep inside a model and ask questions. They'll just check whether your fundamentals in deep learnings are clear or not. So once you're through this round, then what happens is the second round will be product round, in which you will be actually asked to solve a problem. So you'll be asked to this is the scenario. What is your approach? So your answer will depend on your experience, right? So the more you have written models and developed models end to end, the more better answer you can give. But if you have not written any model so far, so your answer also will be very theoretical. So they will understand from there that you are not hands-on on developing models. So once you give answer to models, then if unfortunately that person knows very deeply about that particular model that you have used, there will be a lot of questions. But if he doesn't know about that model, then there will be less questions on that area. And so your intention should be always to, in the interview, to talk and use the words more frequently that you know. Like suppose you are very strong on computer vision. So in every statement, you can use convolution neural network, computer vision, max pooling, all these jargons you can use in your answers. So what will happen is that will, sorry, the interviewer will get inclined towards asking those questions. So then, and since that is your area, so you will be more strong in that area, and you can then give better answers. But if you let the interviewer take the control of the interview, then he will ask questions on the areas that he is strong in, which is a problem. So you might or might not be strong in that area, so there is a risk. So always manipulate with the mind of the interviewer and keep the control of the interview, the flow of the interview in your hands. You should know what the next question is going to be asked. So that is the trick uh, I have learned after giving so many interviews. So always never give them a chance to think about some other topic. Keep throwing jargons and words at them, which they catch, and then from there on, they will ask those questions, and you will excel. So the procedure of preparation for a good interview is, I will say, is focus on your fundamentals, mm, and one or two, at least two projects implement end to end. Uh, So you will know all the challenges and uh, pitfalls and all the um, areas where uh, that can arise during implementation of a end-to-end project, right? So I explaining a project and you doing that project, there are two different things, right? So in your area now, right? Suppose you think your area, whichever your specialty is, you're so much hands-on that you know almost all the types of challenges and problems that you will face and what is the possible solutions for them. You know them, right? So when a person is interviewing you as a data scientist, he's also expecting that you will know all the challenges and pitfalls that you will possibly fall in a project like this, and you should know the solution for them. If you can prove that much, then you are through. So that's the benefit. And one more benefit is that competition is less. So there are very less good data scientists. This is what I have figured out, that there are many data scientists in the market, but very few good data scientists are there. So those niche opportunities which are waiting for good data scientists are easy to crack because the competition is less as compared to any other domain like uh, say .NET or the Java or something. So there will be huge number of experts in those areas. So you being one more expert doesn't make any much difference. But here, since this is a new field and people are not learning it the right way, so if you learn the right way, then there is an upper hand definitely in cracking interviews. So for that, you have to prepare. Keep a continuous preparation is important. So, so that's why we take these Q&A sessions so that you can be
any sample projects you have so that we can go through and
I have many sample projects. In fact, at this point of time, I am doing 5 projects. So
great. So much of work, we cannot do simple coding.
If you want to lend your hand to me, I am very more than happy to give you work. So
Vishwa, I'm okay to take it up, but are we in that position that we can help you in something?
See, you are not in a position like you will never be in a position. Right? I am also not in a position.
What I was saying is based on whatever studies we had so far.
So yeah, you are in a position in the sense that you will understand the problem statement. You will also understand that what you need to do. Okay. But you will struggle in the place when implementation comes. Okay. Theoretically, you may know that, okay, this is what I have to do. And but when you hold the keyboard and the Python IDE to implement the code, you will be stuck there. You will face problem there because you have not done. So it is very important that whatever I am teaching you, suppose I have taught you bias and variance, right? So you prepare, you write codes on top of this, right? That decision tree code I asked you guys to write, right? Nobody wrote it, but imagine if you could have written that, then you would have understood first one algorithm you implemented in Python. That in itself is a big thing. Second is that you will never forget decision tree in your life again if you implement that logic. So whatever is taught in the class is I'm teaching very small topics, right? It's not like in one day I am covering a huge number of topics and it is becoming too overwhelming for you guys, right? I am teaching very less. Either maximum 2 topics a day I am teaching. So, and you have, after Sunday, you have 3 to 4 days in hand to practice on those concepts, right? So if you don't do that and you just wait for the next class, then what is happening is that you are understanding things, but you are forgetting them, and you are not having the practical standpoint, right? When you implement decision tree algorithm, that time you will see yourself that there are so many challenges that you are facing. You will come back to me telling that how I will do this, how I will do that. But now you are in a overall, you know what is this decision tree. So if tomorrow somebody asks you what is a decision tree, you can tell him that this is a decision tree. But can you implement one? No, you cannot implement one. So that you have to build by yourself, because I also cannot help that one to be built, right? So how I was a C++ developer, right? I started my career as C++ developer, and that too for 8 years. 8 years I was doing C++, right? I did not know Python. I did not know machine learning. So I was reading theory like I am teaching you guys, same way I was reading theory from YouTube. And then I was applying them into real-time projects or small codes, POCs, by myself. There I was understanding the technical challenges of real implementation. So when somebody asks me that, okay, this is why this happens, why that happens, then I have the experience of implementing things, right? So even if I bluff, my bluff nobody can catch, right? So that is an important thing. See, there are in my resume, if you see, there will be many projects. Some projects are successful and finished. Some are not successful and finished. They are stopped in between. But I can go and explain that project in a interview, because I know the design. I did some implementation. I can tell them that I did this project, right? Even if that project never happened, but I can tell it. And it is very difficult to detect that it never happened, because I have the practical knowledge. So I will tell from the standpoint of view of a coder. So the other person will realize that no, he has done it. Okay. So you, on this other point, what will happen is that you will give the answer from theoretical point of view. But from practical point of view, when they will ask question, you will not be able to give. So they will understand that you have just done a course or something, and you don't know how to do hands-on. Okay. So that's why I'll tell you that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or sometimes Thursday also, you use these 3-4 days to practice the whatever I teach on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? So write multiple programs, sample programs, hello world programs, some POCs, and just see for yourself, play around yourself with the code and see that how it is behaving, whatever I said, it is correct or not. All these things you can do, right? So when you do it, you become more strong in that concept. So yeah, to give the answer of your question, if you would have done this exercise, this homework, then today you could have taken up some amount of work from me, real work, real machine learning work. But since you have not done this yet, you can still do it, but it will be a very steep learning curve. You have to struggle a lot. That's fine. It means we are all here to learn. So if you are willing to take some work, I can give you guys. So one recent work I am doing is this receipts and invoices, right? So how can we automatically extract information from a receipt and invoice, things like item name, item price, total value, address of the shop, name of the shop, okay, phone number. Okay, so these are some vital information from a that can be extracted from a receipt, right? Discount. But challenge is that there is no single template for a receipt, right? So every shop, every restaurant, they have their own format for receipt. So what is the, how can I make a general solution that can take in any receipt and extract this valuable information from there? After extraction, I can do a lot of things. I can do a lot of things on them. But extraction, how to extract, generically extracting these informations from heterogeneous receipts. Okay, so this is one of the problems that I'm solving. So in this, I figured out that graph convolution networks are very much helpful in this kind of activities. So where a particular receipt is converted into a undirected graph, and then the training is done on that, the machine learning training. So I didn't know anything about graph convolution networks. Okay, so I read like from the basics only. Then I slowly developed the model. Training was done, accuracy is building up. Now we are seeing some promising results. Yeah, so this is how it works. So if you want to take up this work, that there is a small amount of work that I can give you guys, that detect a table inside a receipt, right? OCR table, OCR receipt. OCR means optical character recognition. So PyTesseract is a library in Python which can OCR a particular image file. OCRing means extracting words from an image file. After OCR, you have to like extract the information from there, right? So how to do that? One of the approach is to detect a table inside the receipt. If I could detect some kind of table, then I can find the item names and item values from that table, right? But the challenge is that how to identify that there is a table present inside the receipt, and these are its coordinates. And after this confirmation, then next challenge is read data from this table. Okay, so if you guys want to take up this work, then you can take the challenge of identification of tabular structure inside receipts and invoices. Go to Google Images, download some sample receipts and invoices, and open your PyCharm editor. Use PyTesseract to do OCR and start writing your code.
Visha, for you it was like a easy workflow. For me, Python for it. I understand it is like steep learning curve. Yeah, slowly maybe once the ML portion is done, right, I'll start taking it up.
Yeah,
because anyways, we have to do a jump, right? So it's better we jump earlier.
Yeah. So my suggestion will be that don't underestimate yourself, because today whatever you are doing, you have achieved is because of your merit only, right? So this is just the matter of fact is that this is something you have never done, so it is feeling little alien or new to you.
True.
So make it friendly by making your hands dirty. So as much as you try to stray away from it, you will always feel this fear of being alien or you will think that this is completely so difficult. So the more you make your hands dirty in it, slowly you will, this fear and this low confidence will go away. So that is the fact. So earlier when I started to do machine learning, believe me, I was not very confident because I thought I have engineering mathematics. That is my limit, right? And that also in engineering, how we read mathematics, we all know. So basically, I can say 10 plus 2 mathematics I have knowledge. So with that knowledge, can I learn machine learning, artificial intelligence? Because that time, whomever I was asking, whomever I was consulting with, they were either MTech or PhD in mathematics or electrical or something. And I always thought that how do I overcome this gap like of my mathematical knowledge? Then one day I decided that enough is enough. I have to learn the maths. So what I did, I bought a book. I started reading linear algebra, okay, of engineering mathematics, higher mathematics. So until MTech, however the mathematics. So I just bought the book. I started studying, and I learned and learned and learned. And it took me 6 months, 6 to 7 months it took me, but I finished the maths. Okay, so once I finished the math, now I am not so much afraid because I understand the equations, I understand the PDF, the research papers. I see the math and I can relate. Oh, okay, this is what this is. This is Fourier series. This is Laplacian. They're applying. So all this I can understand. So yeah. So if you ask Imran, if you will tell when I started the first teaching of machine learning, I started with core mathematics. But then people got very bored with that. So, so that's why I moved to machine learning and all that thing. But core mathematics is the more important thing. I will teach you guys that. That is for sure. But not now. After some time, I will teach you. After some days, I'll teach you when I see that you guys are ready for higher mathematics. So yeah. So it's matter of fact. Just it was a gap of 7 months. 7 months, if I am ready to sacrifice my time for mathematics, then after 7 months, I am as good as some MTech or PhD guy. So how does it matter? So we are living in a generation where internet and books are available to us, yeah, and in minutes, under minute, right? So I remember when I was in school and college, to get a certain book, I had to wait for somebody to go to the bigger town, and when he returned from the town, he will bring the book for me. So I had to wait for 2 3 days to get a particular book so that I will study. And now it is like you want a book, you just go to the internet, search it, download the PDF, print from your printer, and start studying. So there is nobody stopping you. So it's just, there's no excuse actually that you can give. So that's the fact. Anyways, so let's start on.
One last small question.
Yeah.
You said artificial intelligence, right? Okay, for artificial intelligence, all these things what we are reading, that will also imply or something different we need to read?
Yeah, artificial intelligence is what? Is everything. Statistics, machine learning, deep learning, all of this is artificial intelligence. Means you are giving, see, one is algorithm, one is intelligence. Algorithm means there is no intelligence, right? In algorithm, who is the intelligent person? The algorithm developer, means the human, right? So suppose I asked you to write down a program to find out all prime numbers between 1 to 100. You wrote the algorithm, right? You did a for loop, you divided the number from 2 to 1 less than that number. If it is divisible, it is not a prime number. If it is not divisible, it is a prime number, and you repeated that for 1 to 100. So this is the logic you wrote in code and you did it. Now, can you tell that the code is intelligent? Will the code behave differently in different situations? If I give you a different number, will it behave differently? No, it will behave same for if I give 9,999, and it will behave same also if I give 9, right? So the code is not intelligent. Intelligence is who developed that code. So that's why this is algorithm. This is not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence comes into picture when your code adapts, becomes agile, becomes intelligent, right? Your code itself, you cannot predict how your code will behave depending on the input, right? So that is when, suppose a neural network, right? So you cannot predict the output of your neural network by some calculations. You don't know. You give an input and you just wait how your neural network will answer it. So everything comes to probability that time. There is nothing certainty that time. Okay. An algorithm is always definite and certain that this is the input, this is the output in a definite amount of time. But an artificial intelligent algorithm or artificial intelligent neural network or whatever, they are not definite. They're agile. In the exact word is agile. Agile means they adapt, they change, they are intelligent. They change according to the problem definition. They change according to the input, right? So that is why this is called artificial intelligence. That the program itself is intelligent. It is not the programmer who is intelligent. The program itself is intelligent, right? So there is a very big difference between these two. Many people fail to understand that you are writing an algorithm. The algorithm is not intelligent. It is very dumb piece of code. It is just doing what you told it to do. That's it. Whereas on the other hand, an artificial intelligent program is intelligent on itself, by itself, right? So that is where the difference happens. So giving an example, handwriting recognition, right? Handwriting recognition is an artificial intelligent problem. It is not an algorithm problem. You cannot have a single algorithm to identify all handwritings, right? So it is an adaptive problem. Somebody can write something, somebody can write some other thing. So is your model or your algorithm intelligent enough to identify an handwriting? So this is not an algorithm problem. This is an artificial intelligence problem, right? So nowadays businesses are identifying such opportunities in their business where they can have artificial intelligence support. Okay. So like earlier also people used software to solve problems, right? Now what has changed? Why there is suddenly a surge and requirement of artificial data science scientists? Why? Everything is same. Why it is different now is because there is an opportunity to write a code which is intelligent by itself. For example, imagine stock market, right? So earlier there was sharekhan.com, right? In sharekhan.com, what you could do, you could buy and sell shares. Did sharekhan.com give you some advice? No. It only gave you a website, very nice website, where you can compare all the things in one page and then make a decision and then buy and sell shares. Decision was yours. It was not Sharekhan's decision. Sharekhan was only giving you the platform, the UI to do the same thing. But now, today, the business is thinking that if I add an ML component inside Sharekhan, then it can give guidance to my customer that buy this company's share because I apprehend that they are going to fall in the recent coming times and then again climb up. So this is an intelligent intelligence. This is something more than a software program. Okay, so these are the kind of opportunities that now the businesses are figuring out in their process, and
yes,
there
there's a lot of openings there in Saudi.
Yeah. So same thing. So now you look around, everywhere you can find use cases of artificial intelligence. Automobile, self-driving cars, telephone industry, so many areas. Earlier data was just wasted, right? Logs of data. If you are in a telecommunication company, so every tower or the place where the tower is set up, they have thousands of logs, right? Which call is coming from which location, who is calling whom. These all data was just dumped in a database and never used. But today, due to data science, this all data has become like gold, right? We can find out so many insightful things from this data and then accordingly make business decisions. So many things. I am giving interview in one of the companies. So they, what they do is, they suggest, there's a finance company, they suggest the finance company to give finance to certain firms on the basis of a consumer profiling they made, right? That, okay, give these people money. I apprehend that they will be successful in the future and they will give back us a lot of money back. And don't give these people money, give these people money. So this kind of decision-making roles or models are being prepared. So they are doing this kind of job, right? So these are all many openings. So if you are really serious and if you continue, then you can change your life 180 degree after say 1 or 2 years of time. Okay, so let's do something today. So we'll talk about ROC and AUC. These are very common questions that come in interview, and you also should know about this. So first we'll talk about ROC. So this requires the understanding of specificity and confusion matrix, which you already know. So just a minute. So let's take an example of a logistic regression. Okay, logistic regression. So this is how a logistic line appears, right? If it was a linear regression, it would have been a line, straight line. If it is a logistic regression, it is a line like this. Okay. So what does this logistic regression do? It classifies the weight of mouses as obese, or not obese. So it's opposite. Not obese or obese. Okay. And say, can consider that we have a threshold. Obviously you need a threshold, right? Otherwise I will know. So say threshold is, suppose threshold is at 0.5. Okay. So suppose this is the weight of a mouse. Okay. And you see here. So what will happen? The logistic classifier will classify this mouse as obese. And suppose this is the mouse. And if you see, this is its weight. So it is below the threshold. So it will be classified as a not an obese mouse. Okay. So that means the threshold, the threshold line plays a very vital role here, right? If I change the threshold line here, then the probability of having obese mice or classifying obese mice will become very high. If I draw the threshold line here, then the possibility of classifying non-obese mice will become high. Okay, and if I keep in between them, there will be a good balance, right? So where to keep this line? How do I know where to keep my threshold line? So this is where your ROC parameter comes. Okay. So this threshold line is what we have to figure out. So how we will figure out this one? We will figure out with the help of confusion matrix. So obese, actually obese, actually not obese, predicted obese, predicted not obese. Okay. So we will have some values here. As depending on the threshold that we select, we will have some values here, right? So if I select the line very low, then all the obese mouse will be correctly identified, right? All the obese mouse will be correctly identified. But some mouse that are not obese will also be identified as obese, because I have set this line very low. And the ulta happens when I set the line very high. So between these two extremities, I have to set my line at a very fine place where I get the best results. Okay. So the ROC curve is the curve between two things. The ROC curve is the curve between, the ROC is called as the receiver operator characteristics curve. ROC, receiver operator characteristic. And it is a graph between true positive rate to false positive rate. Okay. True positive rate, false positive rate. This is called the ROC curve. Okay, true positive rate, false positive rate. Okay, now how to calculate this information? True positive rate is otherwise known as sensitivity. We already know this, right? So that is nothing but sensitivity, and it is easy to calculate. And that is true positives by true positives plus false negatives. So this is equal to true positives by true positives plus false negatives.
It is sensitivity, right?
Sensitivity. Oh, I did say a different thing. Specificity, I said. Oh, okay.
No. You just mentioned the formula, but I was just recalling. It is the same as sensitivity formula.
Yes, that's what I said. So y-axis true positive rate is same as sensitivity. Okay, so this is my formula. So this is true positive. This is what? Neuron? True negative. What is this?
It is
False negative.
false negative.
False negative. And this is false positive. Okay. So true positive rate is true positive by true positive plus false negative. Similarly, false positive rate is false positive by false positive plus true negative. Okay. So this is the second formula. Two negatives. Yeah. So now here, first we start with the lowest this line, threshold line, and we see that we get the false positive rate is to true positive rate somewhere here. Somewhere here we get. Then we make the line little up. We see that the point is here now. And again we make it little up. We see the point is here now. Then here, then here, then here, then here, and then here. Okay. So this is how we plot the true positive rate versus false positive rate for a logistic regression using various threshold lines between here to here. So if I connect all these, so it looks like this. Okay. So this is known as the receiver operator characteristics. Okay. Now, so the line, the green, the line which is 45 in this graph, this line in this graph, this line which is making say 45 degree here, which means equally dividing this graph. Okay, this line shows where the true positive rate is equal to the false positive rate, right? If true positive rate is equal to false positive rate, then it will fall on that green line, which I showed just now. Any point on this line means that the proportion of correctly classified obese samples is same as the proportion of incorrectly classified samples that are not obese, right? So it means we are equally good and bad at that line. So the more we move towards the left of this line, it is better. The more we move towards the right of this line, it is bad. Okay. So this is the middle line. Here, middle line tells that we are equally good and bad. If you see that our point is moving towards the left, then we are doing better. If our point is not doing good, then we are moving towards the right. Okay. So this is how we do it. And if we move down it is not good. If we move up, it is good. Okay. So that means with all this in picture, our most ideal point is this one. This is the most ideal point because after this, there is no more point on the left side in the same height. We have a point in the left side, but that is dropped in height. So that is not so good. So that's why the best possible point or threshold line that happened, this one is called the, will be chosen. Okay. So what happens? Moving left from the green line is better. Moving right from the green line is bad. Going down is bad. Going up or maintaining the same height is good. So if we consider all these factors, then we say that this highlighted dot is the best threshold line. And this may be somewhere here. This may be somewhere here, this line. Okay. This line. So this is called the receiver operating characteristics. Using this, we will know which should be our best operating threshold line for a logistic regression. We can have that same thing for linear regression, decision trees, and many other machine learning algorithms. Okay. Now, the area that is made by this graph, the area that is made by this ROC graph is called AUC, area under curve. Okay. So suppose one more ROC was like this. One more ROC was like this. Okay. So the new area, this area is smaller than the older area. Okay. So suppose we have like this, this is one ROC curve and this is one more ROC curve. So the area under curve of the black line is bigger than the area under the curve of the blue line. And by rule, the area under the curve which has bigger value is better than the area under the curve which has smaller value. So suppose this black color ROC line we got from decision trees, and this blue color ROC line we got from logistic regression. So we will choose decision trees in place of logistic regression for our problem definition. Right? So two things that we discussed. One is the ROC curve and the AUC value. ROC curve tells us the sweet spot where we should hold our threshold to get the best possible split. And what is the AUC say? The AUC say that which algorithm should we choose to have the best results. So these are the two properties, AUC and ROC. Remember this one, this is very frequently asked in interviews, and you can easily explain this by a help of a logistic regression example.
So Vishwa, like we had K4 cross validation confusion matrix, and now this one. So this is like they imply out of for a data set based on the data, more than one model we can use to do the modeling. So
yes,
these actually help us in fine tuning to narrow down which model is actually the best fit.
Right. Exactly. So if I remember, you asked this question initially, that how do we know that we use decision trees or logistic regression or linear regression? So now these are the answers for it.
Okay.
Right? So this is how you figure out. So there are two things you know, that for AUC helps us in choosing the algorithm, and ROC helps us in choosing the threshold value. Okay. Okay. Okay, guys. So I'll stop the class here, and please go through the theory, and next Sunday we will have a quiz. Okay.
Okay.
Imran.
Okay, Vishwa, I'll prepare.
Okay.
No
Okay.
worries. Okay.
Vishwa, the
guys.
other people who are joining, they're not joining since class 2, 3 class.
Yeah, they are going through videos. That is what I have learned. So they are going through the videos offline. And if they have any doubt, they're asking me offline.
Even Shivananda left.
Yeah, so actually he is a lot of trouble because he has a dog who is in a very critical state. So he is taking care of the pet, and he is very distressed, in a lot of distress. That is what I found from his voice and his situation. Plus, he lost his grandparents in COVID also. So he's in distress. So he wanted to take a break. I said, yeah, okay, then fine, take a break and then come back again.
Okay.
Okay, guys. So these are tough times. Anyways, keep hanging on. Let's see what happens. Okay, we'll meet on next week.
Thank you, Vishwa.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Vishwa.